So that's the state of play in the seat of Canning. Joining me now to discuss this further and the rest of the week's dramatic events, the Finance Minister, Matthias Cormann. Thanks very much for your time, and great to be here for me as well.
Welcome to the West.
Thanks very much. Now, what do you expect the result to be in the by-election this evening?
Look, we're not taking anything for granted. Andrew Hastie, who is an outstanding candidate, has worked very hard over the last few weeks to earn the trust and the support of the people of Canning. So we're quietly hopeful that they will reward him with their support today, but we're not taking anything for granted.
The poll in the West Australian seems to suggest that he'll make it easily.
Well, let's see what happens. Obviously, this time tonight we will start getting an indication as to what the actual result will be.
Will you be looking at the swing? And I mean, I know you're not taking it for granted, but it does look like Andrew Hastie will get in. But the suggestions are that there'll be a swing against him. Is that normal? Would you expect there to be a swing against the 11.8% that it has on paper at the moment?
We've been working to win. Obviously, that is the objective. You know which result means for whom and for what. I'll leave that to the commentators and the political analysts to dissect.
Are you looking at pre-polling as well? Because there has been 11,500 pre-polls, 11,500 postal polls. That's about 1/5 of the electorate all up. Now, assuming that those votes were sort of posted before the leadership change, is that going to muddy the waters a bit, the result a bit more unpredictable?
Again, I mean, it's not unusual for there to be high levels of pre-polls. Certainly in the West, that is something that we see in general elections and, you know, in particular in by-elections. Look, I mean, again, I mean, our objective is to win this by-election. Obviously, by-elections are always a bit more challenging for incumbent governments, and but you know, Andrew Hastie and his team have worked very hard. The Liberal Party here in Western Australia has run a very effective campaign, and you know, obviously we hope that it will be rewarded with success later tonight.
But we can't look at this by-election without looking back at the events of the past week. With Malcolm Turnbull now Prime Minister and Tony Abbott gone, does that make the Liberals' job easier?
Well, I mean, the campaign in Canning has been very much focused on who would be the best representative for the people of Canning in the federal parliament, and we have put the proposition, and we believe that that is Andrew Hastie, that he has the experience and the leadership qualities and generally the level of capability to be the best possible representative for the people of Canning, to be a strong voice for the people of Canning in Canberra. Now, everybody knows we did have a change in leadership earlier this week. Malcolm Turnbull is now our Prime Minister, and by all accounts, you know, that change has been well received in the community. So, altogether, I'd like to think that tonight we will be celebrating a success.
So the change has been well received, you say. You know, some of the intel we were getting in the weeks leading up to, well, last Monday was that Tony Abbott was not popular here. His name was not going well in focus groups and the like. Do you think the factor that you say Malcolm Turnbull's been well received, is it that Malcolm Turnbull's been well received, or is it that people are relieved to see the back of Tony Abbott?
I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of all of that. I mean, there was a decision made by the party room on Monday. It is a decision that obviously I support. I support the new leader. I support the new Prime Minister, but beyond that, I mean, I will leave it to the commentators and the analysts to dissect every end trial of what happened in the lead up to Monday night, and I'll just be looking forward to the job at hand.
One of the more controversial elements of the campaign, and this has really sparked up just the last couple of days, was Andrew Hastie suggesting that when he was serving in Afghanistan, he didn't feel that Labor in government at the time had the soldiers' backs. Is that a departure from the normal bipartisanship that we see when it comes to combat operations, and is that sort of comment appropriate?
Well, he is telling it as he sees it. I mean, when I first met him in the very early days, when we were looking at him as a possible candidate, that is a story that he shared with me. And I mean, that obviously is his perception and his experience. I wasn't there, he was there. He was putting his life on the line to defend the Australian way of life. He was leading a team of young men in a very dangerous mission in Afghanistan. And that is his perception. So, I mean, he is saying it as he saw it, and I think that he's entitled to do that. He has earned that right, given the job that he did for Australia overseas.
How do you see it? Do you see it like that Labor didn't have the troops' backs at that time?
Again, I mean, Andrew Hastie had a very particular vantage point. He was on the ground, putting his life on the line. He was putting himself in harm's way.
So you'd agree with him?
Well, I wasn't there. This is what I'm saying. I mean, I believe that he has earned the right to express his view, given his lived experience. I mean, he was responsible for a group of young men in harm's way, and that was his perception. So I don't think it is inappropriate at all for him to share his view, given that he is talking with unique authority about what the circumstances were like when he was serving for Australia and Afghanistan.
One of the other things that has come out in this poll from the West Australian, just going back to that, it's a Reachtel poll, it looked at the free trade agreement and the impact of that with China on this Canning by-election. And it appears that voters were spooked by the campaign run by the unions and Labor. 52.5% of Canning voters believe that the free trade agreement with China was a threat for local jobs. Is that a worry for you as a member of the finance team in the government?
Well, what it shows is that populist scare campaigns do work to a degree. I mean, the truth is that the Australia-China Free Trade Agreement is unambiguously good news for jobs and growth in Australia. It will most definitely deliver more Australian jobs, not less, and that the claims that are made by the union movement, by the CFMEU and others, are inaccurate and racist. I mean, this proposition that somehow, as a result of the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, that there'll be hordes of Chinese workers coming to Australia, taking Australian jobs away, is false. All of the safeguards in our immigration system continue to be in place. Nothing in the Australia-China Free Trade Agreement impacts on that in any way, shape or form. In fact, the safeguards that are in place when it comes to temporary skilled workers are safeguards that were put in place by the previous Labor government. And all of these arrangements continue to be in place. There is no change whatsoever. So, but I mean, on the face of it, it appears that this dishonest populist campaign has had a level of political success, and no doubt that is why this was pursued. Bill Shorten should hang his head in shame, quite frankly, for having associated himself with this.
Tomorrow we're going to see an announcement of Malcolm Turnbull's cabinet. Do you expect to retain your finance portfolio?
That is entirely a matter for him. What I've said to him, I mean, he knows how I voted on Monday night, but I've also indicated to him that now that the party has made the decision to support him as leader, that he has my full support as our leader and as our Prime Minister. I will do everything I can to help make his Prime Ministership the most successful it can be. I've indicated to him that I will serve in whatever capacity he sees fit, and it's entirely a matter for him now to make a decision on where he believes I can best contribute to our overall team effort.
And would you be happy to work with Scott Morrison as Treasurer? I know you are very close to Joe Hockey.
I've had a very good working relationship, of course, with Joe Hockey. I have a very good working relationship with Scott Morrison. I have a very good working relationship with all of my colleagues, indeed. I have a very good personal and working relationship with Malcolm Turnbull. So I'm looking forward to what lies ahead. There's a job to be done. And the job is to put Australia on a stronger economic and fiscal foundation for the future, and I will contribute to that job in any way, shape or form that the leader sees fit.
You were a very strong supporter of Tony Abbott. In fact, you were helping with the numbers for his side less than a week ago. Now, since then, of course, you've pledged full allegiance to Malcolm Turnbull. But do you excuse the voters for sort of looking at that and thinking that it does look a bit awkward, it looks a bit strange for you to be such a strong supporter of Tony Abbott, of one Prime Minister, and then a couple of days later there's a change and all of a sudden you're on Team Turnbull?
Well, I mean, you know, obviously my view and my position in the lead up to Monday night's vote was there for all to see. I was very open, very transparent. I was very open and very transparent with Malcolm Turnbull in relation to that. But I mean, in the end, we do have a responsibility. All of us in the coalition party room have a responsibility to put the past behind us, to reunite behind the new leadership team, and to focus on the job that we were elected to do, and that is to do the right thing by Australia and to do the best we can to win the next election. And that is is what I'm totally committed to help achieving.
So looking forward then, there's been some suggestion that under Malcolm Turnbull, a GST may be a good idea. Is that something that you'd be happy to fight for in the lead up to an election?
Well, let's see what happens. I mean, right now we are involved in a tax reform conversation with the Australian people, and obviously, I mean, for some time now we've indicated that we believe that there ought to be, as part of that conversation, a look at the tax mix and whether there is a way that we could improve the way that we raise the necessary revenue for government in a more efficient, less distorting way in the economy. And that conversation, no doubt, will continue for a period. And at some point between now and the next election, we'll be putting forward our policies for a second-term agenda.
So no major change in direction as far as you're concerned when it comes to potentially raising the GST?
Well, we went to the last election with a policy agenda and with a series of commitments that we made to the Australian people. We've been working our way through implementing our plan for stronger growth and more jobs, including our tax reform agenda for first term. We've always said that we would also have a conversation in our first term with the Australian people on how best to improve our tax system in a second term, and that process continues to be underway. Now, obviously, over the next few weeks and months, as issues arise, as challenges come up, and as opportunities present themselves, we, as a government, under the leadership of Malcolm Turnbull, will make judgments on how best to deal with those challenges or respond to those opportunities.
Finance Minister Senator Matthias Cormann, great to talk to you. Thanks for that.
Always good to be with you.
After the break, we'll have Labor's Sue Lyons with us. Stay with us.